The Wichita Pachyderm Club is pleased to host a special Tuesday luncheon meeting forum today for a panel discussion followed by audience Q&A on the Wichita City Council's proposed water, jobs, street maintenance and repair projects, and paying for them with revenue from a 1-cent sales tax. Our panel members today, they're sitting up at the front table here. Jennifer Basinger. Jennifer is a business owner, an active citizen. Carmen Mason, she's a business owner. She's a business owner and a geologist. Joseph Ashby. Joseph hosts his own radio talk show, The Joseph Ashby Show. Roger Woods. Roger is the Deputy State Director of Americans for Prosperity. Our plan today is for each of our panel guests to present his or her perspective on today's topic in roughly 4 or 5 minutes each. When all panelists have spoken, we will open the forum to audience Q&A with the panelists. Jennifer Basinger. Welcome.
I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Wichita is an amazing place to live. Wichita is an amazing place to raise a family, and it is a wonderful place in which to be an entrepreneur. My husband and I have had several businesses here in Wichita, some out of state, but mostly here in Wichita. And I guess maybe I should stop and say, if anybody is still irritated about the Basinger police supply commercials from the 90s, those are all my husband's fault. I was simply the hired talent. Well, you might not think I was the hired talent, but all Blake's fault. But no, really, what a wonderful, wonderful, rich history we have here in Wichita regarding entrepreneurship. Every time Blake and I go somewhere, we talk about how great it is to come back to Wichita. So sometimes when we start these kinds of things like sales tax discussions, there's lots of negativity and we're going to complain about this and that. But I don't want us to lose sight of this wonderful city that we live in. That's important to me. When I first heard about the proposed sales tax, I started thinking about 2 particular groups, and I'm later going to talk about some specifics within the tax, but I do want to talk about these 2 groups for just a minute. I'm a business owner. It's difficult to do business. If you've never owned a business, let me say, I hear people come and say sometimes, I'm going to start my own business so I can hire a bunch of people and stay home all day. That's not how it works. You do that, you hire all the people, but you never leave. You sleep at the business. It's tough to do business. We're competing with online retailers. We're competing with the other retailers. We're competing with retailers in other cities. The thought that city officials would raise our sales tax and make it even more difficult for us to do business is frustrating to me. And it's frustrating to the other business owners that I talk to. I hear city officials say, yes, but Wichita doesn't have a sales tax. It's 0%. They use that as justification to raise the sales tax. But in my opinion, let's not turn that positive into a negative. Let's celebrate the fact that we have a 0% sales tax. Use that as an incentive to draw other businesses to Wichita. Put it on a billboard somewhere. 0% sales tax in Wichita. Come spend your dollars here. They'll go farther, or whatever. It's a positive, it's not a negative. It certainly should not be used as justification to raise the tax, in my opinion, from a business owner perspective. I mentioned thinking of 2 groups. The other group that I think about is families. A lot of you know that my husband and I are part of a group called the Underground Cafe, and we feed hungry people once a week out of a church near 9th and Oliver. These people are the working poor. Many of them that come in are really, there's a month at the end of the money, and they're just looking for a hot meal, looking for a place to get something to eat. Like I said, working poor. The thought of them having to pay anything more in addition to what they're already paying, it's just going to be tough. It really is. And I know that idea of a regressive tax doesn't set well with everyone, but I need you to know from my perspective what I see in these people as they bring their kids in and they're hungry. The thought of asking them to pay a little more doesn't set well with me. I've asked some of them what their thoughts are on the tax. First of all, they have no clue what I'm talking about. They don't take the eagle. They feel like they haven't been heard. And that translates to all economic spectrums. It's interesting, as I'm out having conversations with people on this issue, many people feel like they haven't been heard. Now, maybe they've spoken up, but they don't feel like they've been heard. We need to do a better job, and the city did try. Despite their best efforts, people aren't feeling like they've been heard. Now, I don't have time to go through all elements of the sales tax. You don't want me to do that. You've probably all heard bits and pieces. I'm just going to talk about two things. I'm going to talk first about water. Every community obviously must have a reliable long-term water solution. No question asked. And maybe at some point that is a sales tax issue. But what we've been given are 3 or 4 different plans. None of the plans have stayed the same. All of the plans have changed. The dollar amount has changed. The plan has changed. The taxpayers don't know what they're supposed to digest, what they're supposed to process and analyze, and what they're supposed to open their checkbook for and write maybe around a $250 million check for. It's confusing. So in my opinion, until we've been given a solid, clear plan, we have no business stepping forward and spending taxpayer dollars. We need to step back and not make an expensive mistake. A sure favorite in this room, I'm going to talk a little bit about incentives, the jobs. It's hard for me to call it the jobs package, but the incentives package, the idea that incentives will grow jobs. Listen, as a business owner, 2 things are important to me. I want a favorable regulatory climate, and I want a favorable tax climate. Those are 2 things government can do for me, and get out of the way and let small business grow jobs. Jobs come from small businesses, they don't come from government. Wichita is an amazing city. Don't forget that part. Let's not rush this. I hope that our city council will not put this on the November ballot. I hope they'll step back, give us some solid plans that we can actually digest, and let us go from there. We can do better.
Tamara, you're up.
I'm quite a bit shorter than Jennifer is. John Todd called me, probably a week and a half ago, and asked me to come and share today some of the information on water and what's being looked at with the sales tax with the water issues. And he gently twisted my arm. I didn't give him an answer, so he called me a few days later, and he twisted my arm hard. So I am here today. And I could make it short because I could just say ditto to everything that Jennifer just said. But I do want to talk a little bit about the specifics with what's being proposed by the city for water. This is a topic that really rose to the forefront of our conscious and awareness a little over a year ago. We had a drought of 2011 and 2012, and back in February or March of 2013, there was a picture on the front page of the Eagle of Cheney Reservoir, and it looked like that reservoir was dry. The banks had receded significantly, and the visual was very alarming. The fact of the matter is that lake actually had quite a bit of water left in it. I know that there were projections that if water usage went on as it had been, that we would run out of water in Cheney in 2015. That was based on some projections, particularly of 2012 usage. And I know that my husband and I had our house for sale on a golf course in 2012 that summer. And our water bill was exceedingly high because I wanted our fescue grass to look very good to a potential buyer. So we paid for a lot of that water, and we were a part of the extensive usage of water in 2012. Guilty. The water is a very complex issue, and to drill it down to 5 or 6 minutes is very difficult. But I want to hit on some key issues that everybody needs to be aware of. One of the things that the city is proposing with their plans for water, or their options, I should say, is that they are planning for a 1% drought. Now, a 1% drought, what is that? Well, 1 year out every 100. I guess probably the best visual for you would be the Dust Bowl visual. The 1930s was a 1% drought. Now, the state requires municipal water suppliers and other public supply entities to submit and get approval of a conservation plan by the state. That conservation plan must include planning for a 2% drought. So statutorily, the state requires a 2% drought planning in the conservation plans. There is no other public water supply entity in the state of Kansas that is doing any more than a 2% drought planning. So just keep that in mind. All of the city's plans are based on a 1% drought. The city also talks about planned conservation. And in their planning out to 2060, they have incorporated a conservation element of 0.35% every year. Now, I haven't done the math and the compounding of that, but I know that the state, with its 50-year vision, is looking at a 20% reduction in water use over the next 50 years. I suspect that that 0.35 is going to get in that neighborhood. That's a good thing, but what I don't see from the city is, a real conscious effort to make a change in the type of landscaping plants that we use. I talked about my fescue lawn on a golf course. That fescue lawn was thirsty, and I guarantee you I overwatered it. But fescue, even when it's not overwatered, is still a thirsty grass. So we as a community should be looking at more drought-tolerant landscaping, and I think that part of the city's function is to help promote that kind of activity. I served on the Joint Chamber and City Task Force on Water, and that was one of the key things that came out of that task force, was that we have to get serious about conservation. It's very difficult for the city to get serious about conservation because it puts them in a revenue deficit. Wichita is not unique in this. It's prevalent with all water suppliers, and that's really the challenge that we have moving forward, is how are we going to conserve water and still have the revenues necessary to support infrastructure and services. I will say that the answer to that is that conservation is going to be expensive as well. But when you're looking at a shrinking commodity or shrinking availability, you're going to be willing to pay more. The city's options, and I was at the workshop that the city provided to the city council members this morning, and I think most people here have probably heard that the ASR is one of their options, and then there's about 3 different options with bringing water from El Dorado Lake. I believe that the city is leaning towards the ASR. And the ASR as a concept is very intriguing. There are things about it that I like. But there are some issues with the ASR that I think we all need to be aware of and that the city really has not resolved yet. Those are issues at the state level and what's permitted as far as withdrawal from the Equus beds. And I know this is getting into details that probably most of you don't want to know. I am a geologist, so I love these details. But the Equus beds, are a limited reservoir for water itself. And I am not convinced that the Equus beds will have adequate water supply for all its users in a 1% drought scenario. And that is what the city is saying. Very quickly to wrap it up, El Dorado had 3 options for bringing treated water. And just within the last probably 2 weeks, El Dorado has come forward with a proposal for bringing raw water. And we have not evaluated that raw water option from El Dorado very well yet, and I think we need to do that. So in other words, water planning, it's not something that can be rushed. There are so many complexities with water planning. You have to take the time to evaluate it, make sure you get all the regulatory and statutory answers to any options, and also to hone in on costs.
When I have people on the radio and we're on for anywhere between 4 and 10 minutes, I tell them it'll be over in the blink of an eye. And so go ahead and get your point out really quick. So I'll try to do it in the blink of an eye here, John. There's two things I want to bring up just in this, this part of the presentation. Number one is the presentation that the city gave at the Kansas Policy Institute water event last week, or earlier this week, whenever it was. The city had a comparison chart with and without the sales tax. And if you look at the charts, with the sales tax looked way cheaper, right? It was 1.4 billion versus 4.1. A lot of numbers, much higher rate hikes if you didn't do the sales tax, much lower rate hikes if you did do the sales tax. Now, I'd just like to submit to you that there is not a dollar's worth of difference in the actual cost between those two scenarios, right? One is, this is what they really showed was how much is it going to look like it's going to cost to the average consumer, not how much it's really going to cost. It's going to cost the same both ways. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, who should pay for the water, the user of the water or the non-user of the water? And that ultimately is one of the major questions of this project. And the second thing I'd like to point out is that I actually recently made a fairly major purchase for a small video making operation that I run on the side. And it was some camera equipment and some audio equipment that I had been trying to figure out what to get for a long time. And I knew I wasn't ready to make such a major purchase for a long time, because every time I went back to my wife and I said, this is the one, this is the camera that we got to get, this is the microphone that we have to get. It was a different one each time. First it was, we want to be able to do extreme slow-mo. And then it was, well, we want to be able to have a cinema quality picture. And every couple of days or every couple of weeks when I'd really get into it and really think I had made a decision, I'd come with something different to my dear wife. And it wasn't until we'd settled on something several times in a row, several discussions in a row, that I really felt ready to make a really big purchase for our family. As I have watched the city present its various proposals and potential options, I see a lot of changing. I do not believe the city is ready to make a decision of a $250 million magnitude. If they were, they would have better plans, and you wouldn't see the consistent morphing of those plans over a very short period of time. That's all I wanted to say to start out.
Well, I was slowly marking items off my notes, and I didn't get them all marked off, so I guess I have to come back up and hit on a few things. I'm going to talk about some numbers. I'm going to talk about the sales tax itself. I think it's important to understand it's a 1% sales tax. You'll hear, well, it's a penny sales tax or it's a 1 cent sales tax. No, everything you buy becomes 1% more expensive immediately. So if you just want to do a little mind exercise and think about when you woke up this morning, you know, the toothpaste you used this morning, that's going to be 1% more expensive. Your breakfast, your cup of coffee, the car you drove to work, lunch. I don't think Pachyderm will pass that on to us, though. The clothes you're wearing, all 1% more expensive. So the question is, what for? Why are we considering making everything so much more expensive? Well, what we're getting is a long-term water supply, jobs, transit, and great roads. So I would submit that transit and the roads can be handled within the current city budget. And it actually, if you look at what the city's putting towards this, those two items, it is really such a small sliver of the sales tax that I think we're better off focusing for now on the water supply issue and economic development. I was at the City Council workshop today, and the staff did recommend ASR expansion, and that is a recommendation among many plans. Now, to his credit, just stepping back in time for a second, you know, King George was sort of in a roundabout sort of way, father of the American Revolution, although he didn't give the colonies representation. And to his credit, he did have a plan. He was trying to play out the 7 Years' War. City Council doesn't have a plan right now. We are literally 2 weeks away from the City Council voting whether or not to put a sales tax and spending $250 million on a plan that is intended to solve our water issues through 2060. 2 weeks out, they don't have a plan. Now, I think if this does go on the ballot, you'll hear individuals say that perhaps, water isn't important to those that oppose this. I would submit that water is very important to those of us who oppose this, and we think we have to get it right. The ASR expansion, they listed at $250 million about a month ago in expense. Now, this morning, city staff said it would run about $200 million to expand the ASR. However, they want to go ahead and keep that extra $250 million there just for other stuff. I don't know what that is. We'll find out. Moving on to economic development. Another thought experiment. The plan is currently to spend $80 million over 5 years on economic development. Let's suppose that economic development funding through the city or through the jobs council that they're going to set up is workable and will create jobs. Now, if you listen to what was presented this morning and what's been presented, 80% of that is going to go to existing Wichita businesses. 20% will be used to bring new businesses, new jobs to Wichita. So $16 million is what they're planning to spend. Why be so cheap if it is that effective? Why not spend all $80 million to bring new businesses to Wichita? This jobs plan is going to be set up and administered by a jobs council, individuals appointed by the city council. I know who here is a small business owner, or a large business owner for that matter? Anybody? Everybody keep your hand up if you expect to be named to the job council. No. If you expect that your business will receive incentives to stay here in Wichita, go ahead and raise your hand back up. Still no. Okay. Business owners in the retail sectors, business owners that use a lot of items that don't go into production are really going to bear the brunt of this. And Jennifer explained, I think, made a good case against this from a business perspective. And finally, who is going to pay this? Well, I've done some very rough back-of-the-envelope type figuring, and it looks like, based on what a average family spends on different items that would be taxable, a family with an income of about $35,000 would pay roughly $200 a year more because of this sales tax. So you can divide that out. That's what, $18 a month, a little over $18 a month. Figure that's about 2 weeks worth of diapers for my 1-year-old. 6 gallons of milk. And I can't remember if it was the school bond issue. The statement is always, well, for 1 cup of coffee a week or whatever, you can have all these great things. The reality is, a lot of families in Wichita, with the unemployment and the inflation rates what they are, that's just beyond their capability. And for those that are in a higher income bracket, that's money that will not go to those businesses. That's just sucked out and will go to selected businesses for economic development and, of course, the water plan.